Did I mention that Tucker Carlson is on a roll as of late? He also sat down with Joe Rogan to discuss a variety of topics. In this conversation, they hit on UFOs, they hit on God, they talk about a lot of different things. Now, big shout out to Living Waters and Ray Comfort and to their viewer who suggested that Ray Comfort did video responding.
I saw these discs that were moving over mountains.
Well, right. I mean, the prophet Ezekiel writes about it in the
Right.
first chapter, wheels in the sky.
This idea that what Ezekiel is writing, when he's describing is a UFO, it just isn't biblical. This is more in common with these other cults rather than Christianity. Thinking more along the lines of Nation of Islam, Black Hebrew Israelism, these other kind of far out cults that incorporate these ideas into their belief systems. So let's fast forward here a little bit.
The Vedic texts.
Of course. So these are spiritual phenomena. There's no evidence they're from another planet. I mean, I think that's the
So yeah, I mean, I would agree with this particular view when it comes to these idea of UFOs, and we've heard other Christians also say this as well, but they're not coming from another planet. This is a view that Christian scholars like Michael Heiser, Hugh Ross, and if I'm not mistaken, John Lennox also seem to take.
That's the lie, that they're from Mars. Look, space, the atmosphere is really well monitored, right? Both for defense reasons, but also because, like, it'd be nice to know when asteroids are coming. And there's no evidence, has never been any evidence that there are lots of these objects, these vehicles coming into our atmosphere from somewhere else, some other planet. There's no evidence of that at all.
I think this is a strong take. If space is well monitored, right, we would expect to see some sort of evidence that this could potentially be happening. Now, obviously, you could argue the whole interdimensional thing, but I think the interdimensional argument actually supports the idea that that is spiritual phenomena and not extraterrestrial in a sense as in coming from another planet. But when we look at space, you know what we see? You know what kind of evidence we do find in space? We find evidence of fine-tuning. Even atheists agree that the universe appears to be fine-tuned for life. Now I'm thinking, atheists like Richard Dawkins, now Sean Carroll. Now, obviously, they would disagree with the idea that God is behind the fine-tuning, but they do acknowledge that when we look at the universe, it does appear to be fine-tuned. Now, obviously, I would argue that it appears to be fine-tuned because it is.
Which means above the natural, above the observable nature. And they don't behave according to the laws of science as measured by people, and
honestly, I think that the fact that they don't behave according to the laws of science, I think this rather supports the idea that there is more to reality than what can be observable and repeatable. It's more the reality than just science or scientism.
Is real, and if there is this constant, I don't know, but it's visible. Like, you can measure it in certain animals.
You can measure adaptation.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence that in fact, I think we've kind of given up on the idea of evolution. The theory of evolution as articulated by Darwin is kind of not true. Right?
In what sense?
Well, in the most basic sense, the idea that, all life emerged from a single cell organism and over time, and there would be a fossil record of that, and there's not. And
there's not a fossil record of transitionary species, like species that are adapting to its environment.
There's tons of record of adaptation, and you see it in your own life. I mean, I have a lot of dogs. I see adaptation in dogs, through the litter to litter. But no, there's no evidence at all zero, that people evolve seamlessly from a single cell amoeba. No, there's not. I
think it's a good point, and I know a lot of people you're not going to like this, but the idea that all life emerged from a single cell organism, there doesn't seem to be evidence to support this. And I believe that what Tucker here is saying, based on what other scientists have said, is indeed accurate. There are certain aspects of one human cell that are just too complex. Michael B. has demonstrated this in his work on irreducible complexity. Now, here's a quote from Darwin from his Origin of Species book. He says, "If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down." This is important Because as I mentioned earlier, one human cell is very complex. There are aspects within that one human cell that are, when you look a little deeper, are very complex. And according to his quote here, that would refute his theory. I would also add the discovery of DNA adds credibility to this view. He mentions adaptation or changes within species. Yeah, and I would agree. I think part of the problem is that people want to look at adaptation or changes within a species as the same thing as going from one species to another. Now, to be clear, I want to, I want to be fair and represent those other Christians who, there are Christians who hold to a view of evolution. Now, they would argue that God is the initiator and evolution is the process which God used to create.
We have not found that at all. And I can't even guess. I mean, I have my own theories on it, but they're not proven.
What are your theories?
God created people, distinctly, and animals. I mean, I think what every person on Earth thought until the mid-19th century, actually.
I think this is a good take. God created people distinctly and animals. Genesis for the win. Look at Genesis 1, right? Talks about how God created the wildlife. He created the trees, the plants, all that. And then he created human beings. And human beings are distinct because we are made in the image of God.
Of like good and evil. Maybe there's something to that. Maybe that's not an illusion. Maybe that's like everyone else has always thought that. Maybe,
there are certainly forces that have evil consequences that exist.
But they act on people from the outside and you feel it.
There are forces that have evil consequences that exist. This is what Joe says. We would agree with this. The question is, what are those forces? Are they human forces or are they something else? Ephesians 6:12. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places.
That's something to brag about. It's something I'm ashamed of. So I'm not saying I'm always on the right side. I certainly have not always been on the right side. I've been on the wrong side many, many times. But that doesn't change the fact that there is good, there is evil. They are at war with each other, and we are subject to the effects of that conflict, and that we're seeing it suddenly play out in ways that are really, really obvious. There's no political explanation for the trans phenomenon. Nobody benefits. You can say, see these right wingers be like, really, it's all about the people who make synthetic hormones. They benefit. Yeah, okay, they benefit. But it's not driving it. That's stupid. It's not about the money, actually. There's no upside. It's not helping the kids at all. If a child,
I mean, say what you want to say. I don't think you can offer too much pushback here. I don't think there's a lot to disagree with here. There is a war between good and evil. What worldview best accounts for this idea? Let alone that good and evil exist. This is a question we have to ask ourselves. We can't just walk around pretending like it doesn't exist or it doesn't matter, because the moment it impacts you, all that goes out the window. Now, he touches on the trans phenomena, and this is important. I agree with him. It's not good for the kids at all. You don't have to look too far, right, to see that anymore. You don't have to look too far to see that it's not good for kids at all. The UK has been making headlines about this recently. Just take a look at the CAS report that just came out and the new NHS guidelines for how to treat kids.
Conversation in the green room of the club the other night about this guy from Canada that's HIV positive, that's a trans woman that's taking hormones so they can breastfeed their 9-month-old daughter. So a biological male is taking hormones and is now breastfeeding their daughter off of their male. And I said, if I was Satan, if Satan was real, I would do that.
Exactly.
If Satan's real, if Satan was going to do something insidious and unbelievably creepy, he would do that.
Well, I think he is.
Yeah. That's just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking for all parties involved, to be honest. Satan is real, and that is in fact what he's doing. You can't be going around saying that men, particularly young men, are in crisis and ignore this kind of stuff. If we do in fact care about the well-being of men, then this is something that needs to be addressed. Now, I'm thinking about these leaders, these leading voices that are going around advocating for men. You have to tackle this. You have to meet this head on. You can't just brush it off. You want to advocate for men, this is something you have to tackle. There's no way around it.
Everything else, it destroys the vessel it's held in, the conduit through which it flows, destroys the person. So like that guy in the end will not thrive.
Right.
He'll be destroyed too.
That guy in the end will not thrive. In the end, he will be destroyed too. This is sobering and should make all of us pause and reflect. Now, as Christians, this should stir us up. And I'm thankful for ministries like Ray Comfort's, even if I don't always agree with his approach. He's giving his all to try and reach people. I'm not saying, go out there and be the next Ray Comfort. I mean, you could be. But what are we doing to reach those around us, those who are near us? How can we help them, both physically and spiritually? How can we meet them with the gospel? Let's make sure that we are taking the Great Commission in Matthew 18 seriously, to go out there and make disciples of all the nations. Let's do this in a way that honors God, that glorifies God, and ultimately brings people to saving faith in Jesus Christ. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time.